first and foremost, thanks everyone for joining today's session all about delivering with speed and high customization. So I want to start with just a couple brief introductions. I'll start with myself, but not to distract from the gentleman up here with me. I'm Jeff Winkley, been at Tulip for about 3 years now, working our professional services group. So actually doing implementation and some co-op development with our customer base. And I'm here to introduce a couple folks to my left. John, why don't you start?
Sure. I'm John Boyle. I work for a company called Pratt Miller Engineering. We do Corvette racing. We do just some defense work, mostly vehicle-based, autonomous unmanned vehicles. But we also do some mobility work, vehicle integration stuff. We've been with Tulip for just over 5 years.
Yeah, Dylan, could you introduce yourself and your company?
Yeah, so I work at Moo. It's a print and branded merch company. It's mostly like postcards, water bottles. You can see some of the products up there. We focus on, it's a high volume of low quantity orders, so everything we do is custom. But we have thousands of orders always going through the factory floor that we have to keep track of. I'm a product manager, or I was a product manager, focused on replatforming the new manufacturing system. And now I'm an agile delivery manager focusing on insourcing and launching new products.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, Jordan, please, quick introduction of yourself and company.
So my name's Jordan. So I work for DentSply Sirona. So it's a large global dental company. Makes just about everything you could ever want in a dental office. Our site is here in Waltham. It's across town. We make patient-specific dental products, so all very small things that you don't want to have put in your mouth. And so I'm the Tulip platform owner at our site, and we've been a Tulip customer for, I think, 6-7 years.
I think that sounds about right.
There's been a lot of numbers floating around.
Yeah.
But for quite some time.
Yeah, thank you guys. So obviously a common thread here is the concept of made-to-order manufacturing, which is an inherently difficult, right, type of production system. And so we kind of want to dig into what makes this type of production unique, as well as the digital technology and the solutions that we build to help support those operations. So John, kind of starting off with you at Pratt Miller. So how crucial is it to deliver with speed to kind of gain a competitive edge and build-to-order manufacturing?
Yeah, so I think pretty much probably for everybody here, having customers satisfied is the primary goal. So that's delivering the product they want when they want it, which is sometimes earlier than they said they did. And that happens a lot to us. So as a low-volume, kind of high-mix company, we came from motorsports and prototype, and now we're kind of getting into that low-volume, high-mix stuff. Specifically, the GT3 program is all customer-based, so they're changing their demands basically daily. We're also in the first gen of the car, so there's a lot of changes that come as a result of going to test days and races. So parts are constantly changing, and obviously they're getting a lot of abuse, so we're seeing a lot there. This means we got to update our work instructions. We have to have documentation of what's on each and every car so that we know which customers are going to be affected by any changes going down the line. So keeping up with all that is very directly linked to our customer satisfaction. So being able to change those things on the fly is super important to us.
So Jordan, your products are actually specific to patients. What are the challenges that you guys have for made-to-order products, and kind of what can go wrong?
Yeah, so we ship out about 700 to 800 orders every day, and about 80% of those are a one-day turnaround. So we do from design to manufacture. So we'll get in digital files, they'll get designed, approved, some customers approve, and then most go out next day. So the biggest challenge is, there are a few products that we can, if we misplace or if they get made incorrectly, that we can remake, but it's pretty much first pass. If it's not right, it's late. So we have to look for, any way to either error-proof or mistake-proof things, and then, there's no amount of time too small that we're trying to save.
And Dylan, along the same thread here. So Moo has become a fairly large operation. How did you scale, or what are the challenges that you kind of face to scale this custom, one-off, built-to-order products you make?
Yeah, so since everything's custom, it's you've got to work within the factory lines. If one machine goes down, you got to have primary and secondary routing. You've got to be able to keep up with the demand. Some orders, it's small volume, same day delivery. You've got to be able to push that out, and then also be able to support somebody that comes in wants 20,000 business cards. Be able to quote them accurate lead times, be able to support the production on that. So we have to be able to do that on top of the quality inspection, routing configuration, how do you address scheduling issues. So all of this is really high demand for the printing industry, and you have a competitive advantage if you can solve those problems early.
You mentioned an order for 20,000 business cards. How much variation is there in one order to the next? Because that's just a much larger number than I expected for an order of business cards.
Yeah, so it might not be business cards. It might be more like a flyer.
Sure.
So like a menu item that you have to distribute it to multiple facilities. But yeah, we do get those large spikes. So how do you support that?
Yeah.
What happens when that large spike comes in? Do you contact the customer and tell them, hey, actually, we can't do this. We don't have the capacity for it.
It's probably not an option.
No,
Yeah,
no, it's
figure it
not.
out. So on that note, I can imagine each of your companies and organizations obviously have large tech stacks in order to support this type of production. So Jordan, kind of given this, what you mentioned, I think a one-day turnaround time, where were you kind of having the most trouble in supporting that kind of turnaround? And then, how do you design a solution to actually support that model?
Yeah, so the genesis of how we started using Tulip and the underlying problem that you asked about was, as medical device manufacturer, like they're always trying to introduce new products, and so as new products come along, you have new operations, new routing. So we have an in-house MES system that was built. So that team is working on trying to make sure from a regulatory standpoint that they're checking all those boxes and introducing new products. So when we, as on the shop floor and as engineers, go to them and ask for maybe some user-centric features or reports, they're like, yeah, it's at the bottom of the list. But those types of things are at the top of ours. So Tulip really allowed us to kind of supplement and work together with the systems that we already have.
Yeah. And John, so at Pratt Miller, how do you guys kind of use technology broadly to kind of standardize processes, when your products may have frequent changes?
So we work directly with our operators on the floor. Like I said, it's a very manual process doing these vehicle assemblies because there are low volume, so we don't have all this automation. So we work directly with our operators on the floor to update work instructions. We use version control, things like that. We also use some external softwares to capture changes and change management, communicate issues across the team. So we use quite an array of technology to keep everybody communicating and documenting all the issues that we've seen.
Yeah. What does a typical issue look like when trying to build a race car? That's more of a personal curiosity question.
There's a lot. So I also manage the composites department. And the way we do composites is wet layup. So it's a very manual process. It's not a autoclave with pre-preg material. So we're wetting out the material. Everything's done by hand. And I get lots of comments about my composite parts.
Wrinkles?
They don't fit. They don't look right. So there's things like that. But then there's also manufacturing defects that we get from outside suppliers and parts that the rev has been changed that we were unaware of, and bolt holes don't line up, and those type of issues too. So.
Gotcha. Yeah. Thanks for that. So Dylan, in the printing industry, what does your technology stack look like in order to support your process?
Yeah, so we use Tulip as the front end. It's what all of our users will interact with, everybody on the floor interacts with. We take all of the data from the system there, and then we actually have backend systems using AWS, DynamoDB for the data, And that's kind of where the powerful side of it comes into play. So we can't go into the specifics within the printing industry because it is a little bit more competitive advantage, but some things you have to consider is like batching. How do you group multiple things that can be printed on the same piece of paper together, but not waste too much material in the end, and still meet the SLA for the customers? So yeah, it's mostly just we use Tulip on the front end, and then we have IT that can go and roll out stations day in, day out, which is worlds above what we had before. It would take us months to introduce any kind of change. Any new device, you had to have the engineering team on hand, ready to support if something went wrong. So being able to do this within like the Tulip interfaces, it's magical. Is one way I'd say it.
Yeah, that concept of batching I always found interesting in the printing industry, because I'm sure you can't just run one print job for each individual order. So I guess you're optimizing for both time of delivery and also maybe the type of print that you're doing. And this is all an in-house built system in order to kind of figure out this routing algorithm.
Yeah, you're always trying to consider time, so production lead time, the cost associated with the waste that you'd associate, build within it, and then also machine availability. So obviously you have a limited amount of these presses that you can have in your factory. So how do you schedule that throughout the day? Do you just have some human go in and make all these decisions? You could. Yeah. Sometimes humans aren't best at making these decisions. Sometimes it's, I like the substrate, I want to run this substrate all day. So you have to kind of like build that behavior.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we introduce those behavior changes through Tulip as well. Okay. So it's work instructions.
And some of like the the flyers that we had displayed over in HQ that were from Moo, what's the turnaround time on something like that on average?
Anywhere from 1 to 5 business days is what I can say. It depends.
Okay. I won't ask further. Maybe I'll just make an order and we'll see how long it takes.
We advertise 5.
Okay, gotcha. All right, I guess this is kind of a question for all of you. So you all have obviously various technology stacks to support your business, but how does Tulip being an open, flexible, generalized operations platform, how does this help kind of enable your unique businesses? And John, we'll start with you.
Sure, yeah. So with Tulip being open, like I said, we came from kind of a prototype background, so a lot of what we do and what we have done is very manual. So there's a lot of paper going around, a lot of notes in people's toolboxes and things like that. So Tulip has allowed us to get on the floor and capture those things, live with the people who wrote the notes and use those documents. But it also lets us build things in small chunks. So it's easy to write a work instruction over here, and then we start helping people in IT's inventory over here, and then we have a work order request app that we've created, and now we're getting to this point where we've built all these things, and now they're getting to the point where they can interact with each other, and we can kind of come up with this MES that's custom to us, because we've done studies and research trying to figure out which tool is the right tool for us, but there's always features that we don't need, but you have to use in order to use the system as a whole. And we always run into these issues where it's either a cost or a functionality that's not meeting our needs. So with Tulip being open, we're allowed to make it how we need. And also it interacts with our ERP system, our PLM system, and all these other things that we do have a big foothold in and can't really change very easily. So
I think you just described composability better than anyone at Tulip can, and you related it to the real world. So that was very well done. I'm just kind of curious, John. You talk about like these integrations with your PLM and ERP systems. Were these integrations that you were considering when you were like initially building your first kind of Tulip solutions, Tulip apps?
I guess I would say no, because we weren't sure what Tulip was capable of yet. Right. Obviously there was, the advertisements, but like I said, we've been a customer for 5 years, and I think at that point it wasn't as easy as a transition as it is now. So now that we've been in the game, I guess, for a while, and we've gotten a lot more people on board, because like I said, the prototype area is not a team that wants to be digitalized, right? So now that we've gotten their buy-in, it's a lot easier to make that sell to take it to the next level and integrate.
Great. So Jordan, I'll pass it over to you. Similar question. Same question, rather. How does an open and flexible operation platform help support DentSply?
Having as many like different products and processes going on throughout the building, and we have a lot of cross training, so a lot of people can move throughout the building and do several things. So that is a really good incubator for a lot of good ideas, and we are fortunate enough to be able to like implement a lot of those kind of small user ideas of, oh, this button needs to be here, or I want this link to take me here instead. And being able to deliver those, I think, has shown people on the floor, oh yeah, like this can probably do almost anything that I want it to. Like, I'll just ask Jordan. Yeah. And I mean, we're usually able to give them those things. So it's a positive feedback loop.
So you guys are only limited by Jordan's creativity.
And time.
Yeah, and time, right. Dylan, how about you? Just talking about how open, flexible platform supports Moo.
Yeah, and I've kind of touched on it a little bit. So on my team, when I first started, it was just myself, one principal engineer, and an agile coach. That was all the way up until we actually signed a contract with Tulip. We're now at a team of 4 engineers, myself and an engineering manager. So we get to focus on a little bit more of the advanced backend systems. And then at the same time, because of how easy it is to use Tulip and make changes to the front end, if there's a change like text on a screen, or we want to introduce like one additional step in the process, that can be a quick win or rapid win, as he was saying this morning. And then same with the IT. So IT, it's worlds above where we were. So actually being able to install and manage these systems, I was getting messages today just on renaming an interface. And I didn't have to touch it. They were able to figure it out because they had to restart the computer. Before, the whole system for that lane would have been down until some of the support engineers were able to help.
This was an operator that wanted something changed?
Well, they had to reset a computer.
Okay.
And I'll talk to your product team about why it's frustrating every time we have to do that.
Open ears.
But yeah, we had to rename it. We had to reconfigure it. IT was able to support it while the engineers were still building the juicy stuff. What's next?
Yeah. Great. So John, back to you. So you often have cars that are kind of still being designed, as you're building them. So how do you keep these work instructions actually accurate, relevant for your mechanics putting these together?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, we use an external software called Jira to document all of our issues, and then we have team meetings. Those issues will be discussed, what the next course of action is, and then that will be fed back directly into our Tulip apps. And then like I said, we work on the floor with our team. So those changes will be made on the floor with the team, because oftentimes that's replacing a part or installing a different version of the part. So we'll need to work with the team on the floor to capture new images, new text to go with that. So they'll be alerted of the issue as it's being documented. And then that way we get it documented correctly and in time. And then we use the publishing, the revision control to document what changes happen during those times.
Do you ever allow operators to actually give feedback right within like an application to actually say, hey, on this step, this is wrong, this should be changed?
Yeah, we have done that before, not on the current program. We did develop we called it a communication app. So we had kind of a production area that was a little bit kind of off the main area, and they had a lot of issues with, part quality or running out of parts, things like that. And, they'd be running around the building trying to find the quality guy or the purchasing guy, and, they're on lunch or they're in a meeting or whatever it is. And so we developed a communication app where the operator could easily just touch a button like, I'm low on inventory. And it's not specific. It's very simple. I think there was 8 buttons. It's very simple. It's like line down situation, or like, hey, we're getting close to being in a situation here. So we've done that as well. Most of the kind of we need to change this right now is handled with the one-on-one communication.
It's nice to hear that even in made-to-order manufacturing, problems are similar, just like general discrete manufacturing. You can still run out of parts. If you don't have parts, you can't build. So, Jordan, you kind of mentioned that you feel almost like limited by not just creativity, but also your time. So how do you actually prioritize, what you're going to build in Tulip, in order to provide kind of the best solutions for the folks making the requests?
It's a tough question, but I feel like I'm the kind of the one man shop. So we use Tulip at our site, and then also at a site in Sweden. And we really kind of go on, since we have such a quick turnaround time, like, if someone brings me a problem or has a suggestion, like, is this attacking one of the top 2 on the Pareto chart? And like, if it's not, like, I have to just be like, that's a good idea, but we got to keep it for another day. So really just focusing on, like, is this a top priority problem that we're fixing?
I guess, what are you using to measure problem, right? You mentioned Pareto chart. Is it, returns, yields, issues?
Yeah, it's typically, yield, and then the different error types that we'll get in certain departments. Yeah.
Understood. Yeah. There's I like the analogies here of your businesses having such quick turnarounds for the products you're making, but then also kind of just going through these stories and examples of turning around solutions for your frontline operators at equal speed.
Yeah, and so we have a lot of edge cases that come up, like it's an order with like a canceled item, and that will kind of it might error out the app, and that's something that I know about, but it's kind of one of those things, like, is that frustrating for an operator to have to go and do that order manually? Yeah, but it's 1 or 2 a day. Right. So it really is just about, like, priority.
Gotcha. And Dylan, what about at Moo? What does your kind of app development process look and feel like?
Yeah, so as a product manager, that was pretty much my day in, day out. Was how do you decide what you're building next, and how do you actually take that to delivery? So what we did was we would go through discovery, reach out to each individual user, also talk with stakeholders to understand what opportunities there are. And we try to leave it at that. They're all just opportunities. And then we start to go through like stack ranking, prioritization calls. And then once we decide that something's worth building, whether it's hitting like a key metric, or if it's just a higher level, like you got to expand wide before you can go too deep in an area. Once we get there, we would go into Miro, and we'd start kind of like collecting the requirements. And Miro is just kind of like drag and drop, add, draw, whatever you want, create diagrams. So we'll use that to actually do some of the wireframes and low fidelity sketches and start refining that with the team. And then from there, what we'll end up doing is we'll start kind of like sometimes creating wireframes from Tulip, drag and drop that onto Miro, and then we'll add little like sticky notes is the way that we do it. And that's what the engineers will actually build. Is they'll actually build like, okay, this button does this, it needs to do all these back-end services. And then by the time that we actually release it, we can test with the users before we release it into production. Once we roll it out, we can get feedback and make those incremental changes. So it's very iterative, and it's a lot easier with Tulip.
Yeah, and this is actually, speaking, I guess, more to the prioritization piece of it. This is often a challenge a lot of our new customers face, where it's like, okay, where do I start, right? How do I find the easiest to implement thing with the highest impact? And that's even though, our professional services are really focused on like getting a customer up and running. We often want to have those conversations too of like, are we actually targeting the right thing? Is this the right pain point? Is one pain point, one use case more valuable than another? So it's interesting to hear how you guys talk about both the identification and then also the actual development side, where now you're taking that focused target and putting it into action. And then John, for you at Pratt Miller, I guess same question. Prioritization, app development, feedback loops, testing and iteration. What does that look and feel like for you guys?
Yeah, as far as the prioritization, like I said, we're very prototype heavy. So just getting operator buy-in was probably our biggest issue, because obviously we have a bunch of engineers who have all these great ideas, but when the operators on the floor don't want that, or don't understand it, then it's never going to work, right? So having that buy-in from the floor is super critical. And so that app, the communication app, like I mentioned, was probably the biggest piece that got us to where we are today as far as being digital. Because it seemed like after that, they understood that, this is up to them, right? How this looks and how it feels, all the back end stuff, they don't have to see all that. All the stuff that I care about, they don't need to see all that. So prioritizing getting the buy-in was critical for us. And then from there, it's just going off of what they need, right? What's their next pain point, like you mentioned. So for us, work instructions was critical, especially since we changed things so much. We end up with cars in the field that are built on something that's 3 versions old, and now they need to service it. And the way that we do our documentation, we have that documentation ready, and we can just send it to them with an updated part, or send it to them with an older version part because their car can't be updated. So those type of things really help for us.
Yeah. First off, when you mentioned about a great idea coming into reality, I was really hoping that you were going to use the analogy when the rubber hits the road, but you didn't. That's okay. I do want to double click on that communication app that you mentioned. So you said it kind of quickly that we had, it was that application or, that use case that actually spurred like the operator buy-in and the cultural shift. Could you talk about that cultural shift a little bit more? Because that is something that is inherently difficult to do as part of like your overall digital transformation strategy. And you seem to have found a particular use case that really resonated with the workforce and got that buy-in. Could you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So that was one of our pain points. Like I mentioned, we had operators running around searching, and then at the end of the week, someone would come to them and say, "Hey, how come we didn't hit our quota?" And they would be like, "Hey, we told this person, or I spent half a day trying to find that person, and nothing ever happened." So the app that we created, created a log of the issue. It had an escalation path. So if the first person that was alerted didn't answer within, I think it was like 30 minutes, then the next person would be alerted, and it got all the way up to like the head of manufacturing. So it gave incentive for everybody to kind of buy in and jump in, and the operators loved it because they didn't have to run around and search for anyone anymore. So yeah, getting that buy-in is critical, especially if you're coming from no digital on the shop floor. It's huge. And then that led into all of our other apps. So the work instructions, like I said, were next. We did that on one of our prototype defense programs, and the operators that assembled that vehicle ended up in the motorsports area, and they told all the people in motorsports, like, "Hey, we need to get these guys over here now so that we can get in on the ground floor and not try to play catch up, later in the assembly where we're kind of already past that point, and we're documenting things after they happen," which is helpful in the future, but it's not helpful to the person trying to do the assembly now.
Yeah.
So
it's fascinating. To kind of start to wrap this up, so what kind of pieces of advice would you have for other manufacturers that maybe operate also in the build-to-order, high-mix environment, and they're thinking about deploying digital technology? Jordan, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so as someone who kind of inherited the platform and became the platform owner with some apps that were already pretty mature, but built at a time where Tulip was a very different platform than it is now. So we had and are trying to work away from having like very large monolithic apps that have kind of duplicate steps, duplicate triggers. And so my advice would be, in not even just our types of environments, but any, is to do kind of very small, modular, composable. You have one app that issues material and one app that reports errors, and having a kind of a system to work between those, and also having it broken down in those smaller chunks or functions. It reduces the risk to make changes, because so our main app, it was so big that someone could ask for something and we're like, yeah, we should do that, but the risk to implement it is too great.
And it probably would take a team of people to even uncover what you needed to do in order to make that change.
Yeah. So in when I took over as the platform lead, like probably spent 3 or 4 months just like looking through triggers to try to figure out how it worked.
Dylan, same question. What advice would you have for other companies that wanted to try and replicate what you've done?
Yeah, so I would say take a step back before you start. So when we first started, we looked at the data model and we were trying to figure out what do we need to collect in the long term so we can move faster over time. And by doing this, what happened was by the time we actually released it onto the floor, all those requests start popping in. People get excited. They want to see more and more and more. If we hadn't taken this approach, then we would have been building on top of that, and each individual release would have taken more time. So yeah, really look at the data. See what really needs to be in place. Make sure it's flexible. It's going to work for your needs. You don't want to have to keep fixing over and over similar to like monolithic structures. So yeah, start with a strong base.
Yeah. So you said that you got people excited and they wanted more and more and more. Again, this kind of resonates on that topic of the cultural change and everything. How has that become apparent at Moo? Like, have you had operators that have been highly engaged in the app development process, in the feedback process? Could you speak to that?
Yeah, so when we kicked it off, we identified some key users, key operators that could influence the change as well. And we made sure that they felt involved. They were heard. We took their feedback. We easily started making those changes so they could see it happen. Again, compared to before where we were doing this, it would take a month, 2 months, sometimes it'd be years before they see any kind of improvement. So now what happens is they'll come directly to me, they flag me down, they'll send us messages, they're very willing to help. They want to see the system grow. And now we've got other operators, they're like, when are we going to touch Tulip? When are we going to touch Tulip?
Yeah, it is such a, I think, powerful experience for maybe operators that have been, let's say, burned by technology before, where they've given feedback. They were part of these testing programs, and all the feedback they gave was never incorporated. To hear someone out and then potentially a couple hours later have that change reflected to them at their station, I think is a really powerful experience for a lot of the workforce. John, back to you. Same question. General advice that you would give for other similar companies.
Yeah, that's a hard one because these guys stole my answers. But no, I think doing the small chunks, the composable, to use the word, apps, hitting what is your pain point, keeping it simple, and getting the buy-in from the users, the end users, right? Because if you don't have their buy-in, you can make the prettiest app in the world, and it's not gonna work. So, like I said, that communication app, that wasn't like our goal. Wasn't to be like, oh, this is our gateway into everything. It was an app that took probably 2 hours to make, and it was the biggest impact that we've had from a single app. So, just shooting your pain points and keeping things small, because I think, as probably most of us have used software where it's very frustrating and you can't change anything, but showing the operators how Tulip can be modified in seconds, standing there with them, and they say, hey, what if it did this or changed that color or whatever it is, you can change it on the fly, and it gets their buy-in and makes more efficient.
Yeah, that's great. Even the experience that you mentioned of having the app editor doing that development side by side with end user and operator, I think is incredibly powerful. So, what I want to do now is kind of turn it to the room. So we have here on stage, not myself, but 3 folks involved in successful tool deployments, working in these unique kind of high customization companies. Are there any questions that anyone has about their deployments, about anything we talked about today? Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I guess, how did you deal with, I guess, what volume did you sort of deal with the variety of work instructions and getting that implemented? I'll just use ourselves as a reference. In order, a couple thousand different work instructions you might need to, upload into the system or recreate. How did you manage that? What kind of effort did that look like?
So I would imagine maybe for you, John?
Sure. Yeah, it's looked different over the years for sure. When we started, it was just me. So now we have 3 other engineers that do work instructions as well. We've tried to, like I said, get involved earlier. So we'll try to get involved to the point where we're using CAD and we can kind of create like virtual builds and kind of get the structure set up. So that takes some of the load off those initial, hand build in-person sessions. But then from there, yeah, it's basically just a one-on-one, and basically we have one engineer with one assembler, and we just kind of pound through it. But those virtual builds and kind of getting anything ahead of time, even if it's just a chat with an assembler to say, hey, what's the normal process of this, and you can create a structure and go from there. But all those instructions, thousands of them, they take a while. So no shortcuts there.
Dylan, Jordan, anything to add before I respond as well?
I can mention we haven't done it yet. It's on our roadmap. You can do file uploads within Tulip, so you can actually connect within different workstations. You can connect the SOPs, the work instructions, whatever you want to be visible to the operator, and you can connect that to very specific products as well. It can be very powerful depending on your actual manufacturing process.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add, and kind of leading off Dylan's point, is we often, when we're first engaged with the customer and it's discrete manufacturing, they may have thousands or tens of thousands of work instructions, right, that have been modified and perfected over the years, and it's what their operators expect to see because they're used to it and they've been working there for a while. We often talk about, okay, how do we do this in potentially phases? First off, we should ask the question, do work instructions need to live in Tulip? Are we actually trying to improve digital guidance? Is that actually a fundamental use case that's going to increase productivity? If it's not going to, and I need to track where my orders are in my shop so I can tell my customers when they're getting their product, that's got nothing to do with the actual digital guidance that the operators are getting. So maybe you're just embedding PDFs into a Tulip app. Maybe that's actually the first step. Then the other little piece that I'll tease is we do have some very smart people here that are working on some generative AI tools to potentially take existing work instructions and kind of auto-generate and create applications that would help facilitate the customers that may have thousands of PowerPoints, Google Slides, PDF documents of existing rich text work instructions. But that's a great question. Yeah. Any other questions in the audience? Yeah.
I'd like to hear from all 3. If you had an MES system before, did you come off of one to get into Tulip? Or if not, did you at least evaluate those? And Johnny kind of touched on it already. You mentioned you already have maybe an additional MES, but what kind of legacy platforms did you come from that did not into Tulip?
Yeah. You want to take these in?
Yeah.
Go for it, Jordan.
Yeah, I can start. So we have an in-house MES system that's developed by a team in Sweden. So our goal is not to replace that, but for it to work together. So they're focused on the highly technical details and the requirements that we need to meet for medical devices. What Tulip does is gives us the kind of user-centric features that they just don't have the bandwidth to provide. So they'll always work together.
It's more of a augment and extend type application, yeah. Dylan's probably very relevant for you as well.
Yeah, we've got 3 different MES systems existing in Moo right now. One is the monolithic one that was self-grown. Build something over here, it breaks everything down the line. We also had a print-specific MIS. It fills some of our needs, but not all of them. So we know that we can't ever fully migrate to that system. We use it for very, very specific tasks. And then Tulip is on top of our existing manufacturing system, and that's what we're migrating towards.
Yeah, and then I think I already kind of covered that question, but yeah, we never had an MES. Like I said, we did some research and some comparisons, but it was always either too much features or too much cost. And then the time to implement that and upload all your information. Tulip just allowed us to kind of build it naturally and organically, and it fits exactly what we need. So.
Great. It's a great question. Thank you. Any other questions here? Yeah.
So you guys talked a lot about the software applications that you created using Tulip. Do any of those use that application to control your machines or get feedback from your machines? Or is it just straight a user interface app where you're collecting the data that the application is
Yeah, so we do use some of the machine monitoring functions for live dashboards in the shop, and then we have those embedded on like our Teams site. So that's using that in Tulip has prevented us from having to go out and find another tool or use something like Power BI, which is very powerful, but I'm not a user of, so I don't know. And then we do use automations to kind of pull in some more challenging information from SQL tables and supplement kind of the machine data.
Yeah, we have plans to use more of those integrations. Right now, we mostly just integrate with our presses. So sending files to a press can be automated. Today, it's done manually. It's a very tedious process. So being able to send the proper file with the proper data behind it, we use, it's called JDF, JMF. It's really powerful for us. It saved a lot of time. And then we can also pull status of the machine. But again, it's only our presses right now.
Yeah, and we've had, like I mentioned, prototype and low volume stuff. So we've had different projects where the customer required different things. So we've integrated digital torque tools that sends the data to Tulip through the gateways. I don't think we call them gateways, edge devices. Sorry.
You know you've been a customer for a while and you call it a gateway.
It's old school. Sorry. Yeah, so we've done torque tools. We've done pick to light. At certain stations we'll have pick to light. We do label printing. What else? There's one more. Anyway, yeah. So those are like peripheral things. We've definitely used that, but app by app and customer by customer for us.
Thank you for that. Yep. Right there in the red. Did that answer the question, though? Yeah.
Have you guys used Tulip at all to help with the machine learning?
No, we have not. Well, so I would say on a corporate level, there's not a lot of guidance or interest in that's trickled down to a site level. I know that they have teams, some of the software teams are looking into that, but at a site level, no, we haven't used any of that yet.
We haven't yet. It's again, yeah, it's on the roadmap. Engineers might not like me saying this, but what it is, it's around advanced scheduling. So there's some potential within the printing industry to make sure that things are moving to the right places at the right time. And so machine learning is very critical for that.
Yeah, as a company, we have a new initiative for the AI stuff, but nothing directly related to Tulip.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is that what we're, from my vantage point, working with a large swath of customers, what we're starting to see is, Tulip is not going to be the ML system for them. However, Tulip is going to provide human contextualized data as one of the data sources that they're going to ultimately use, for their AI ML initiatives. We're seeing this labeled and branded in a lot of different ways. If you walk through kind of the, the main booth with all the tech partners and everything, some of them are doing are doing this specifically. I think TwinThread is a really good example of a company that is creating, industrial ML models. Recognizing that they're going to ingest data from many different sources. What Tulip helps provide with that partnership is, the human contextualized data. Like, there was a problem and the description of the problem in human language is, ABC, XYZ, which now these large language models are actually uniquely positioned for actually ingesting it and making sense of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Question, I think this probably goes to John, related to getting your work instructions out into an app. Do you have an approval process? Like how quick can you turn around new work instruction, get it on the floor? And if you had a process, like what's that entail? Like levels of approval, et cetera, compliance type of things to get that floor?
Yeah, so for us, it's like I mentioned, that external software Jira. So when we see an issue on the floor, or we expect an issue to come in, because of a obsolete part or a new version of a part, if we can predict it, that's obviously ideal. But a lot of times it's on the fly. So typically, like I said, we'll submit that issue through our Jira software, and then that will go to a meeting and we'll discuss it. And that usually happens within a day or two, depending on the severity of the issue. Jira lets you tag kind of which groups need to be involved, whether it's design or engineering or inventory purchasing type of groups. And then once that happens, we immediately go update it on the floor. So I would say, depending on the severity of the issue, I would say it's under a week for sure. But once we get the go-ahead to update Tulip, it's done within probably an hour. And then we use the revision control, and we tag the Jira issue number, the issue ID, so that way we can go back and reference if we need to look that up for more detail.
Does that help? Yep. Great. Any other remaining questions? All right. Thank you, everyone, for today's conversation. Really appreciate it. And thanks to the full panel here. Let's give a quick round of applause.